Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and welcome to just a small special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, well, usually I'm here, as I am this time really, to talk of the stories of film, and I talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all those bits and bobs really that go to make the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. This, though, is a slightly different episode of the podcast. It's one of my occasional specials where I talk to filmmakers about either their body of work or upcoming movies. And in this particular case, at the point it was being recorded, this was for an upcoming movie for the James Bond movie No Time to Die. Now, No Time to Die is a film I'm sure I'll come to in a full episode at some point in the future. But I had the opportunity to talk to its producers, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, the overlords, really, of the James Bond saga. And we had a conversation that took place at the press junket for the movie, as a result of which it is, I mean, they do, I think it's fair to say, go quite heavy promotional on it at certain times. I think it ends up being more Barbara Broccoli than Michael G. Wilson. But we got to have a bit of a conversation about that era of Bond, and in particular the Daniel Craig era of Bond that was coming to an end, and has come to an end at the point this is going out. So No Time to Die is directed by Cary Fukunaga. It's written by Neil Purvis, Robert Wade, Fukunaga and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, based on Ian Fleming's characters, of course. And the cast is Daniel Craig as James Bond, Rami Malek, Lea Seydoux, Lashana Lynch, Ralph Fiennes, Christoph Waltz, Ben Whishaw, Naomi Harris, Jeffrey Wright, Billy Magnussen, Anna de Armas and Rory Kinnear in there as well. And the film is released in UK cinemas on the 30th of September, so roughly around when this podcast episode is going out. What I'm going to do for the purposes of this then, we don't go spoilery in this episode, not least because I hadn't seen the film at the point I recorded this interview. It is recorded over Zoom, so do bear that in mind when taking into account the audio of it, and also do take into account that they are in heavy selly mode for the movie, which is entirely understandable. I'm going to play you that clip. We'll come to the interview the other side of this.
James, fate draws us back together. Now your enemy's my enemy. How did that happen?
Well, you live long enough.
Harder to tell the good from bad, villains from heroes these days.
We used to be able to get into a room with the enemy. Now they're just floating in the ether.
She still loves you. Did you know that?
What is it?
You don't know what this is. Is she one of them?
I don't know her at all.
When her secret finds its way out, it'll be the death of you.
So that was a clip from No Time to Die. I'm delighted to be joined by Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. How are you? How do we find you all? It says you're in a ballroom. Is that right?
We are in a ballroom.
Yep.
Yep.
That's exciting.
We're doing great. We're very excited to be here and very excited to be finally releasing the movie.
Well, can I get my clickbaity question out the way now? Because then it's done and dusted. I've just checked the latest odds, and Bono and Prince Harry are both 500 to 1 to be the next James Bond. In your expert opinion, are they worth a flutter?
I wouldn't put any money on anyone at this point.
Can I just ask, because I'm fascinated by you two as human beings and what you've achieved. And I just wonder, I have got no idea what this bit is like for you. Sitting in a press junket, you knowing lots of stuff that I'm not going to ask you, so don't worry. But just on a human being level, how you feel about this, how you felt about the wait, and just how good a gauge over the years you've been of what's in your gut and how people have reacted to it.
Well, it's been a long wait, and while we have been waiting, it's just been a waiting game for us, but for the public at large, it's been a terrible time for people in different industries. In the film exhibition industry, the theaters, it's been a terrible time. For people in restaurants and pubs, it's been terrible. High street retail, there's so many businesses that have been so hurt and financially. But for us, it's more an emotional thing, waiting and waiting, hoping, wanting to make sure that we could show this to the cinemas, and waiting for the time when it seemed to be right and safe for the public to go back. And this looks like the right time. So finally, it's come.
Do you enjoy appreciating it's been a prolonged period this time, but do you enjoy 2 weeks before release? Do you get any pleasure from that bit and just like the build up?
Well, I think we have great pleasure in knowing that we have an absolutely fantastic film. And we are so eager for the audiences to see the movie and then to enjoy the film and to see Daniel Craig, who's just been an incredible Bond, to see the sort of final chapter in his story. So we have a terrific picture. It's very entertaining. It's emotional. There's great locations and stunts and action and fabulous locations. And it really deserves to be seen in the cinema. And we're so thrilled that we're actually at the point now where we can open the movie and audiences finally get to see it. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time.
I mean, what as much as Bond goes through what look like end-of-level boss difficulties on the big screen, I mean, just reading behind, just focusing on the Daniel Craig area, reading behind what you've had to go through to get these films on screen. Because if I've got this right, you got Casino Royale, you had to work with a new studio. Quantum, you had a writer's strike. Skyfall, you had MGM, didn't have any money, then it had some money. Spectre, you had a star with a broken leg for the bulk of production. I mean, and then I watched the documentary that you put out, the Being James Bond documentary, and there's Daniel Craig just standing, just saying, this one was very hard to make. And it's just like, against the backdrop of those four, which hardly looked easy, I mean, can you, again, just in a human term to us, just get across, just what were the particular challenges of this one, even before a global pandemic?
Well, these movies, they're big movies. Then we shoot for 6 months. We travel to many countries. We have lots of action. There's lots going on. And so they're always challenging for sure. But we have the most spectacular crew of people, technicians and craftspeople who kind of get us through all the difficulties. I mean, I always say to young people when they say they want to become producers, I say, well, you better love problems if you're going to become a producer, because so much of your job is about solving problems. So this film had, just as many problems as all the others, except obviously, we had never faced a pandemic before. But as Michael says, lots of people have suffered over the time, and we now are just really happy that the film is as great as it is, and that we have an audience who's eager to see it, and we won't disappoint them.
Just in terms of problem solving, because what fascinates me about you all is just the worlds that you live in, that you go into theatre, you go into independent film. And I think this is an opportune moment to say Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool is a terrific film. I'm really a huge fan of that. But I'm just curious, the problem solving, just the problem solving on a Bond movie and the problem solving on an independent movie, do they kind of help each other out? Are there things you've discovered on the productions of different scales that helped these ones?
I think, they're kind of regular problems that you face making a film. I think the one thing that you can say for sure is you never got it licked. You never can say, oh, I've done it all. I know everything. There's no problem I can't solve or I can't predict, because every time you make a movie, you sit there going, wow, this has never happened before. Oh, how are we going to deal with this? As part of the excitement, you get up in the morning and you think you know what's going to happen that day, and then you're thrown a major curveball. But that's the excitement. I mean, we're very privileged to be making these movies, and we never take it for granted. do we?
Never. But we're in a lucky position. You know, we have a great franchise that we inherited, and you know, we really, for all the problems we have, we have very little to complain about. Really, they're challenges.
This Daniel Craig era of Bond has, I mean, it strikes me it's just been different on a few different levels. And it's almost to the point where it feels like we get a closing chapter where, and I'm genuinely not trying to stir with this or anything, but we've got a Bond who's decided to leave of his own accord and picked the time of his leaving, which has allowed you to complete an arc of the story of one Bond. I don't think we've been there before. I wonder if you could talk a little to, because you've both hinted at this in interviews, just the core three of you as a storytelling collective, because it's clear that Daniel's got very involved in that side of it at all. And I just wonder how that's contrasted with your previous experiences. Again, that's not a stirry question. That's not where I'm going.
Well, I think all the actors have obviously made major contributions.
Yes,
They've all reinvented Bond for themselves and for the time that they've existed in. I think the situation with Daniel was very different. We were going into a new century and we wanted a 21st century Bond. And he was a very well-established actor, as you know, before Bond. And he had never craved the limelight at all and was very reluctant to take the role on because he knew his life would change. His life has changed. The man has not changed. The man is as great as he was when he began, as humble and as honest and hardworking as he was the first day we started with him. But, he did say to us, if I'm going to take this on, I really want to be an integral part of the whole enterprise. I'm not, he said, I'm not an actor who shows up and reads lines. And we welcomed that opportunity because he is so intelligent and intuitive, and he understands drama. He understands what makes things work. So we really embraced him and relished the opportunity to get him involved, and he did. And the films have benefited tremendously from that.
It's something that really comes across in that documentary, actually, that quite a lot of the time, and I think it's a media representation, he comes across as quite cold. And there's a suit of armor on there, and to hear the three of you and the way you interact with each other, I'm guessing that's actually the normal, but that's a less interesting story to people.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that is the normal. He is a great guy. He's very humorous. He's just a wonderful human being. I mean, we love him like a family member, and he's very down to earth. He sees himself as part of the crew. And he respects everybody on the crew, and they look up to him. And he's been remarkable on these films.
I mean, you talked a couple of times about being responsive to the times that we're in. And Michael, I've read how you saw Casino Royale as a response to 9/11, for instance, that you felt Bond had to go in a different direction after Die Another Day. And I'm curious how closely how keenly you are aligning things. Because I always loved License to Kill. And I always growing up thought License to Kill was like the right Bond film at the wrong time, that it almost preempted an era. But looking back over the films, it's just like it's quite unnerving how close you get to reflecting what's going on. I'm just curious if you can just talk to that a little.
Well, we try when we sit down with the writers, when we think about making a new film, we try to figure out what it is that is going to be concerning people in the next few years. What are the issues in the world that are going to develop into something? Sometimes we get it right, and very often we get it right. Sometimes we don't get it right, but that's part of the challenge, and that's one of the things we try to bring. These are contemporary films, and they deal with contemporary issues. They're set in contemporary times. They reflect the contemporary society at the time and the values of that society. So you can almost see it as a history of Western European American culture when you look at these films. They reflect what was going on at the time, what people worried about.
There was a comment you made in the documentary as well, Michael, where you talked about being wary of films with too much plot. That you want the focus on, you want the character to always be in there and the character to be almost at the heart of it. Can you just talk to that a little? Because obviously your experience is so extensive at writing these, and if that's something that just comes natural to you.
Well, I think it's been learned bitter practice rather than through intelligence. Sometimes you can get too carried away in the plotting of it and you miss out on the story, which is the emotional journey of the characters and what's going on for them emotionally. We try to get the plot solid, but I've found that the simpler the plot and the more complex the story, you generally have a better, more successful film.
And if you've got people listening to this who see themselves as storytellers, who just haven't really had the courage to get their stories out, is that where your advice would be? Just to pull it back and just to simplify?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've got a story to tell, you have to say, what is the story you want to tell? And you have to keep asking yourself that question throughout the whole process, because sometimes you can get so lost in what you're doing that you have to remind yourself, okay, this is what we want to say with the story, and everything has to serve that story. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Can I ask my mildly nerdy question about the gap between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall? Because I've been fascinated by the Daniel Craig character arc of Bond and the whole loose, blunt weapon of the first two films. I just remember what really, really took me aback and was really arrested by. Can I just ask, because Skyfall ran a little bit later than scheduled due to issues out of your control, was there ever a temptation to do a bit more mid-story there, had circumstances been different? In that by the time we get to Skyfall, we've got a Bond who's having to do the test to see if he's still fit for duty, which is a brilliant scene, and it's no slight on Skyfall at all. But was there any talk about investigating the middle bit, the bit from going to a blunt weapon to the established, almost very experienced Bond?
I don't think so. No. I think we just, we started working on the script, and once you start with an idea, you kind of go with that idea, and we wanted very much to celebrate Britain in that, and to create, the family around Bond, with Q and Moneypenny and everyone. So it came out of that. It came out of wanting to bring Bond into Britain, into his home at Whitehall, and that was the kind of motivating thing. And of course, we had Sam Mendes, who was at the helm, who was also very, very pleased to come back to Britain and to make a film in Britain, having been away so long. So. And it turned out, we had the Olympics and we had Adele, and it just, everything just seemed to go right. So we were very, very happy with that picture.
A podcast audio never really quite gets across the size of the grins on people's faces as they're telling stories sometimes, but that clearly was a very special time for you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, sitting at the Olympics, when we knew what that opening ceremony was going to reveal, with Bond and Her Majesty, the Queen, coming out of the helicopter. I mean, that has to have been one of the great highlights of our lives. And just the roar. I don't think I've ever heard anything like that before or since. When the Queen turned around, everyone was expecting Helen Mirren, and when she turned around and it was her,
and you knew, yeah,
we knew, yes, we knew, because we got it. So yeah, it was fantastic.
There's two things about just this era of Bond that I just want to just quickly ask you about, and they just terrify me. And number one is how close to release you shoot these films. Because I talk to lots of people behind
you. Well, terrifies us.
Well, that's kind of what I want to know, because I talk to people who do these huge films and they're shooting them 18 months, 2 years before they come out. You consistently, and it clearly works, but you consistently are starting shooting these films 11 months before we see them in a cinema. Is there ever a moment when you're just sat there and you're just like, what the hell are we doing?
All the time.
Well, it's a rush. It's a rush, but it's good not to have to waste too much time on post-production. Right?
Well, yeah, we try to keep the storylines pretty current.
Yeah.
So, you can't, you don't want to lag too long between, I mean, we're amazed at this film. I mean, this film was ready a year and a half ago, and it feels like it's as current as it could possibly be.
If this film is now about a global pandemic, then I'm just getting my lottery numbers off you, if that's where this is going. One thing I just wonder if you can talk to this as well, because I was always struck when you came to GoldenEye that not only were you doing so much heavy lifting, reinventing everything, you were building an infrastructure to make these films. That you had to put in place a studio complex. You had to bring in the expertise that wasn't necessarily in the UK in such quantities at the time. Can you talk to just perhaps the unseen legacy of your Bonds and kind of how you feel towards that?
Well, it was very, very important to us that we come back and we make the films in Britain. It's always been very important for us to make the films in Britain. These are British films. They're made by British technicians and craftspeople and artists. And when we came to do GoldenEye, I mean, the first thing was the press were saying to us, oh, well, the walls come down, the world's at peace. Why do we need James Bond? So we had to answer that question, although that question was answered by geopolitics anyway. And when we came to come back to Britain, there wasn't any stage space. So, Peter Lamont, who was our extraordinary production designer, been with us for many, many years, said, all right, well, what do you want me to do? And Tom Pevsner, who was our executive producer, said, well, Michael and Barbara want you to build a studio. And so we went around the country looking for places that we could convert. And we found the Leavesden Rolls-Royce airplane factory, airplane engine factory, and went about building the studio while creating the sets at the same time. And that's something that most people wouldn't dream of doing. But because we have such great relationships with, designers and craftsmen and people here, we knew that we could pull it off in Britain, and we had the guys to do it. So we did it. Leavesden has gone on to house many, many productions, and people forget that it was Bond who built it.
Well, that's my point. Leavesden, what a legacy, and that's just one part of it. I'm just getting the wrap-up thing. So if I can just ask you this, outside of Bond, do you have more independent films and theatre productions on the way? Because I think that side of the pair of you is equally fascinating.
Yes, we have lots of things that we're doing at the moment. I mean, I'm shooting a movie in Atlanta.
Oh, heck.
Pull away for a week to do this. We're shooting a film about Emmett Till, who was a young 14-year-old boy who was lynched in Mississippi in 1955. And it's been being directed by and written by Chinonye Chukwu, who is an extraordinary filmmaker who did Clemency. So we're doing that, and we have some pretty exciting theater projects that we will be doing next year as well. So we've got lots on our plate, but the most exciting thing at the moment is releasing No Time to Die and waiting for audiences to come out and see it.
It's been a pleasure to speak to the pair of you. If you can give me the wink now, if Prince Harry or Robbie Williams is indeed the next Bond. There we go. People will not know what secret communication went on there. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time. Take care. I am absolutely absolutely sworn to secrecy on the secret message that passed between us there, but suffice to say, I'm heading off to the bookmakers very, very shortly. That was the interview with Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson for No Time to Die, which is in cinemas in the UK from the 30th of September 2001. It also brings to the end this episode of Film Stories, this little bonus extra. So, thank you as always for listening, and thank you for your time. If you want more of my waffling, I'm on Twitter at Simon Brew. The Film Stories Project is on Twitter at Film Stories Pod. The website, filmstories.co.uk, is updated every weekday with movie news, features, reviews, mayhem, all sorts of bits and bobs there. You can buy our magazines at store.filmstories.co.uk, and we're on YouTube, youtube.com/filmstories as well. Most important thing though, as always, is you all take care, you all look after yourselves. I'll be back soon with your regular episode of Film Stories. Take care. Bye bye.